So on library search, we're going to search innovation in new technology and how it potentially impacts on social inclusion. We had already discussed ignoring the verbs, so I've literally picked those as the key terms. So I click on search. Right. As expected, because the search terms used are quite generic, we have come up with a very large number of results. They're always sorted in terms of relevance, so it's worth bearing that in mind. So the ones that are most relevant to the topic appear first. What I always do is I actually always have a look at the first 10 or so, just to have a sense of what's there before I narrow down. So already, by just looking at some of these entries, and you'll notice that a lot of them are ebooks actually, electronic resources, there is the topic of how to empower disabled students through education and technology. There is a book on social policy and learning for the European Union, again, very interesting. The next one is a really fascinating one, which is really useful if you're looking at the history of technology, because technology has always been cutting edge in its period, in its context. And this one is about the invention of electricity. And similarly, what you will find is there is a really fabulous book here on innovation and development, which talks about case studies in India, because I've had a look at it, which is really useful. So already you can see there is a vast array of superb resources. One really good little tip, which I always follow, is if I really want to get a sense of what a book contains, I don't need to go to the library, whether it's a print book or a digital book. All you need to do is click on the title of the book. And once you do that, you can see that there's a link that says view description. So you click on view description and it gives you a summary of the contents and the titles of the contents and each chapter. And this, for example, gives you an example of case studies in Bangladesh and India and alleviating poverty. So again, you don't need to go to the library. You first see if a book is relevant in that respect.
Can I just really briefly, it's a really perfect example, because randomly I'm supervising with Richard, with someone else at the moment. Both those people were at Bristol. So Richard Owen was the supervisor on the project, who is one of the co-authors, and the other guy was also at Bristol. One of the things I noticed, though, you can see who the authors are, right? It's always worth, particularly in academia, going, who are these people? Can I talk to them? Because often, if I'm contacted by someone talking about my work, I'm like, yeah, I'll talk to you about my work. So I just thought that was a really nice example, is when you go into that information, you've got this wealth of information, not just about the book, but also who wrote it and where it's from, right? So yeah, that was all.
Absolutely, because they're the cutting edge people and you know who they are and you can contact them, as you say, absolutely. So already very interesting, very broad reaching. What I need to do now is, obviously 8,000 is way too many. So now we need to start thinking about how we can refine our search by using the left-hand panel. And I'm guessing that because we're talking about new technology, it might be appropriate to say, consider looking only what's been happening in a more recently. Now, this is not always appropriate, but in this case, it might be. So what I will do is I will click on the last 5 years on the left-hand panel in order to reduce the results. And let's see what happens. It's taking its time. Already down to 3,000 results. Now, the other thing you can do is you can start thinking, okay, do I want to pin it down and narrow down the context? For example, we saw that book about, you know, financial enablement and improvements of people's lives. How about looking at finance in order to narrow down? So what I'll do is I'll keep the same search box, but I will add an extra word and I will put finance. And let's see what happens. Okay, so we're down to, again, a third of what we had already. And again, really, really useful materials there. The other thing that's worth bearing in mind is having a look, again, more specifically at a specific area. For example, I might decide, by the way, you will notice that I've put some of the phrasal terms in inverted commas, in quotation marks. That's because they're so regularly used that they're recognized. So instead of looking for new and technology, it picks up on new technology as a phrasal search, which we'll discover further down the line is very important for databases. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to substitute new technology for wearable technology because I want to narrow it down. So I'm taking out finance and I'm going to change new technology to wearable technology to see what I come up with. Here we are. So let's do a search and see what happens. Okay. This is actually a pretty good result. We have about 195 results, which are very much relating to that specific area. And I think that's a really good outcome. So what I'd like to do now is show you how you can save and share your searches. So what you do is you click on the items that you want to save. First, you need to sign in, okay? So I will sign in here as myself. And it's basically the single login that you're very familiar with. It's nothing complicated.
And just whilst you're doing that, so that's the same for every database. It's always going to be your single sign-on. It's quite useful.
Absolutely. You don't have to remember passwords, etc. So I've signed in and it recognizes me as Marika. You know that that's the case. So what I've decided is, let me just save a couple of these sources. So what I do is I click on save and the star. And then I go into, let me see, I'll just save a couple more. Yeah. So I've saved 3. Okay, I've saved a few items. So what I do now is I go into my items to view my list of records. And you will notice that they're all there. So what I do is I can create a list if I want to. I can call it wearable technology. If I want to share the list with other people, I click on shared, and that way, if you're working in a team, you can do that as well. You save your list and you add the items to the list.
Can I just ask, can other people add items to that list if it's shared?
Now, that's a really good point. I am not entirely sure you can, but at least you can share what you find with other people.
Great, let's go with that.
If that's not the case, I will find out.